Good evening and welcome to For the People. Back in the 60s and early 70s, when most songwriters and singers were answering the call to rock and roll and rhythm and blues, one gifted songwriter and singer with the group called The Impressions responded to a different call, the call to freedom and self-respect for a people he described as darker than blue. The singer and songwriter, Mr. Curtis Mayfield. I asked him, when did he know he'd be a songwriter?
Well, I guess I found myself at quite an early age. I was about 10 years old. My mother used to recite a lot of Paul Laurence Dunbar, and she would recite different things in church. And of course, I didn't know what I was, but just reflecting from her, it was somewhat instilled in me. And my grandmother being a minister back during the early years of my life, I picked up a lot of things, even when I thought I was just asleep in church, right. But I guess in finding myself, I was around 11, 12 years old when I began to put lyrics together. And I was usually always looking for something a little bit unusual, a little bit food for thought. And it came pretty easy for me.
How did you get started with The Impressions?
Jerry Butler, whom goes back with me back during those early years when we sang gospel, we both lived in Chicago, and he found me on the near north side when I'd moved with my mother to the Caprini Green projects. And we kind of, after a few years of breaking away, we kind of ran back into each other. And he'd found these fellows who came in from Chattanooga, Tennessee, known as the Roosters. And he used to come over to my house and talk to me about leaving a group that I used to sing with called the Alpha Tones over on the west side of Chicago. And we were just all young, and he'd come and try and sell me on why I should leave my group and join up with this group known as the Roosters. They were a bunch of older fellows, but they had a positive ambition in mind of wanting to make it. And I, being one of the youngest of the group, after a while, my car fare got a little short for going to the west side, and I just fell on in.
What were some of the big hits of The Impressions?
Well, there were things like, of course, For Your Precious Love, which was Jerry Butler and The Impressions. We later came back with a song known as Gypsy Woman. There were things like I'm So Proud, Keep On Pushing, People Get Ready, We're a Winner, Check Out Your Mind, Amen. The list sort of went on and on over the years.
And you only wrote about 2 of those.
Yeah.
Back during the 60s, I guess a lot of people looked at black entertainers and said, hey, these guys are living a good life. How was it for you, maybe some of the other black entertainers that you knew during the 60s?
Well, the good life is sometimes the depth of struggle itself. You tend to always, even if you somewhat think you've made it in life, you like to look back to the good life of the times when you had to work for it. And we being young fellows, we were amidst the struggle, the black struggle, and we were struggling as a black group. And the times of getting airplay and the whole movement for black music was somewhat into a struggle, There were lots of radio stations back during the early 50s and 60s that didn't play black music. We kind of came in on what I like to call the cusp, because the Fats Dominoes and the Sam Cooks and all the Drifters and a lot of the groups that had had been in for years prior to us was still happening on the circuit. So our struggle, wasn't any harder than any other group, but I think we probably paid our dues,
What kind of debt would you say American popular music, if that's the right term, owes the black artist of America?
Well, I don't look upon it as a debt. I think
what
if
kind of
anything
contribution?
is
How would you describe the contribution?
Of black people,
Yeah, black music, yeah.
Oh, there's a very large contribution. And if there were any debt to be paid back, I think just the equalization of all stations playing and intermingling the black music with what is considered pop, Of course, nowadays, R&B music is pop music, And of course, it's moving on in trends and changes. But back then, the struggle was crossover to, of course, try and appeal as a black artist to a larger mass, which, of course, was the white consumer. And we still somewhat have that struggle even today.
Okay.
And if there was any debt to be paid or to just kind of give back for the contributions of what black music has probably given to America, I'd like to think that it was just equalization of fair play on all stations.
Just open up the doors.
Open it up.
Mm-hmm. You've written, I like to say, some hellacious songs, very meaningful songs. And if you can, for a little while, I'd like to listen to a couple of them and get your reaction to them. Tell us what you were thinking about, what you had in mind, that kind of thing. The first one would be We the People Who Are Darker Than Blue.
We people who are darker than blue, are we gonna stand around this town and let what others say come true? We're just good for nothing, they all figure. A boyish grown-up shiftless jigger. Now we can't hardly stand for that. Or is that really where it's at? We people who are darker than blue, this ain't no time for segregating. I'm talking about brown and yellow too. Hi, yellow gal, can't you tell? You're just the surface of our dark, deep well. If your man could really see, you'd know your color, same as me. Pardon me, brother, as you stand in your glory. I know you won't mind if I tell the whole story.
We people who are darker than blue, I guess that particular song come about with me in a mood of anger, to want to speak upon myself, to talk to myself as well as to my brothers. As we, of course, all those who have made it, I mean, as we all distinguish ourselves from yellow, brown, fair, and of course, we people who are darker than blue, we're all really the same. And the song is somewhat self-explanatory.
The song also seems to be a challenge to black people also.
It was a challenge to me for mine, for us to really think, to see ourselves just as we are, and to be proud of the challenge to be a little bit prouder, and to close it out, in a manner of respect. Pardon me, brother, as you stand in your glory. I hope you don't mind if I tell the whole story, And
how would you say our thinking has changed? Black people's thinking, attitude, etc., has changed since since, say, the 60s? Has it gotten any
Well,
better, or are we thinking more for ourselves now, or what? Well, how do you see it?
Well, I think it's still more or less on a singular, attitude with most of us.
What do you mean, singular?
Rather than in mass. There are still those we've gotten so far away from. We're sort of like in the new generation, and the new generation isn't quite aware or quite as close to what the struggle was as those who might have been in the 50s and born in the 40s, and 30s. But I still think that people in mass still don't quite have the depth of what they're all about, and those who are being positive and being successful are still somewhat singling themselves out, and have to, in order to really move, using the strength of what they sense around them, but still not as many as I'd like to see, even today. Even with the movement and all, I don't feel that there are as many black people moving in mass toward the same optimistic values and stuff.
Did you feel a special responsibility to write so-called message songs during the 60s?
I felt no responsibility, but I felt like I owed it to myself. It was a way for me to achieve my own diplomas, the things that I didn't get from school, being that I'd left school so early and couldn't have gotten these type of experiences anyway in school. But it was a form of self-teaching, because the things I wrote, I also wrote and talked to myself, and in being talented, it allowed me a platform to be able to speak these things in teaching myself, but still have an audience to give me the sense of was my values or my attitude about my writings and what I was thinking confirmed,
Okay.
And most of the times I would get a right on.
Well, another song that most of us will remember is We Are a Winner.
We're a winner, and never let anybody say, boy, you can't make it, 'cause some people mad is in your way. No more tears do we cry, and we have finally dried our eyes. We're moving on up, moving on up. Lord have mercy, we're moving on up now. We're moving on up. We're living proof in all's alert that we're two from the good black dirt, and we're a winner. And everybody knows it too. We just keep on pushing, like your leaders tell you to. At last that blessed day has come, and I don't care where you come from. We're all moving on up, moving on up. Lord have mercy.
We're a Winner.
We're a Winner was a very positive song for me, and it brings back times of good times, even during the struggle, because this was during the 60s. Martin Luther King and the Reverend and Andrew Young, a whole lot of people that I don't even remember the name, but they were there, all within the struggle, right? Mm-hmm. And it was about times of discarding your inferior complexes about being black and finding yourself beautiful,
Do you think that we find ourselves beautiful today, or is this totally just basically an individual?
I think that many of us do, but I think as in many other levels of value. Those are things that one has to discard, fears and old-fashioned things instilled into them, you know, to discover themselves, and of course then project themselves in such manner as to where they feel superior, or at least feel leveled with everybody else.
On this particular album, you say that a lot of radio stations didn't want to play this tune. What about that?
Well, that was true. When we released We're a Winner as the Impressions on ABC Paramount, this was a different kind of music. People were playing rock and roll and rock, you know. It was either R&B music, which was more or less about, you know, love or the blues, or people were into, you know, the rock stuff, or what was known as contemporary music, popular music and standards. No one was speaking in terms of the depth of current events and the actual strengths of people trying to struggle in America.
But that must have taken some courage on your part, though. When everybody else is doing one thing and you come along and talk about We're a Winner.
Well, the controversy of it was just a challenge for me, you know, and it's hard for me to back off when I believe I might be right, or if I feel deep inside myself I'm right. The only way I can be proven wrong is that it seeps into myself that is wrong, and the inspiration and the awareness that that particular song gave us as a black mass of people just allowed me to just keep on pushing with that.
All right. Stare and Stare.
Stare and stare. I look across the aisle at the process he wear, while people sitting back digging my nappy hair. A sister standing and no one even care. We're all just riding with our nose in the air. Another stop on the bus. Some people boarding, different color than us. They hate to mingle, but no one makes a fuss. The thing about it, there's no one here we can trust.
Stare and Stare.
Yeah, well, if you ever rode the bus, you know, especially early in the morning. I'm from Chicago, you know, I used to ride the bus everywhere. And of course, a lot of people on the bus. The whole setup of Stare and Stare is people thinking, feeling, you know, and thinking that nobody else is thinking and feeling them same things, you know. And of course, the explanation of that whole trip is of all the Sunday times of preaching, where all the folks that the script's been preaching, you know, they're hard to find, like it's a crime to do of good and brotherhood, you know. Seems no one would, and the only thing is doing bad instead of good, you know. And
I know it's probably difficult.
It's a mind trip, you know.
But how long does it take you to write a song? I guess it.
Well, sometimes just in a matter of minutes. Other times it may linger, you know, for days.
Do you realize how heavy this stuff is? I'm not trying to be funny. I'm serious. I mean, do you really realize how heavy it is and how unique it is?
Well, I guess for me, I realize the depth of it, but I not dare speak any further than that. I like to hear it come back to me positive. And the very idea of getting that right on or reaching the soul of somebody else because they have experienced or have thought and sensed the same things is usually what I'm after, because then I know I'm not alone.
I like your style. Check out your mind.
Here's something that you never had, sitting on an oily rag. The price is right up on the tag. I put it in a brand new bag. This thing will let you be yourself. Don't wanna pay nobody else. Nothing like you ever saw. And it's not against the law. Why don't you check out your mind? It's with you all the time. Why don't you check out your mind? It's with you all the time.
Yeah, that takes me back, you know. You know, what is that saying? You know, a mind is a what?
Terrible thing to waste.
Thing to waste, you
right.
know.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes you get just that dumb within yourself to pick up on that and want to come back and check yourself out. You know?
But you're saying check out your mind. As I listen to radio stations, and I guess most people listen to radio stations, is that really the purpose of it? I mean, do radio stations today try to get people to think, or just...
Well, no, I mean, the radio stations are about one or two things, if not both. And that's, of course, to sell advertisement, make money, and to be of some type of community service. And it just, records just happen to be there, you know, to hold the audience and pull the ear, you know. So it's not about the radio stations per se. Of course, there are some program directors and many DJ who do have, you know, positive thoughts and consciousness about what they're playing. And of course, that's where Mayfield might get in and things of that sort, you know. But for the entertainer, for the writer, it's a way of communicating and getting to the consumer. Of course, to commercially sell records. And of course, if they're a true artist or a writer, to display their own values as to what they're all about, you know, in competition with all the other stuff that you hear every day.
One poet that I really grew up on and grew up to really like and love, Langston Hughes. Has anybody ever compared you with Langston Hughes?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, but I mean, you have that in-touchness with everyday folks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we got two more cuts. The next one is If There's a Hell Below.
Sisters, brothers of the whitest, blacks of the crackers, police and their backers, they're all political actors. Hurry, people running from their worries, while the judge and his juries dictate the law that's partly flawed. Cat calling, love falling, fussing and a cussing. Top billing now is killing. For peace no one is willing. Kinda make you get that feeling. Everybody smoke. Use the pill, the dope. Educated fools from uneducated school.
Let me tell you, that song make you feel like shouting. I'm serious. That song makes you feel like shouting. Really?
Well, that's That particular song is for me, is something that will never be outdated in the world that we know of. No matter when you listen to that, it can be years past or years to come, it will always be current. And of course, that bottom line, about all of us, I'm sure if there is a hell below, I'll see you when you get there.
I hope not. Anyway, okay, I plan to stay a believer.
We're over 20 million strong, and it wouldn't take long to save the ghetto child. If we'd get off our ass, $10 a man, you'll think a while. 20 million times 10 would surely then put our brothers free. One congregation with better relations would demand more respect from society.
In that particular song, I plan to stay a believer. I believe in that. Well, it starts off with just food for thought about the Indians. And in my own mind, being from Chicago, I just can't recall ever seeing an Indian, And I think the word Chicago is taken from an old Indian name, so it just took me back during times of my own struggles to see their struggles, and saying I had a friend of mine who claimed he was a friend to another Indian, and the Indians was telling him that they was filled with hate because their tribes, they waited too late, to protect their past. Instead, en masse, they all just sat on their ass, and signed all kind of proclamations on the dotted line when they didn't have no Indian lawyers at that time.
Hello.
And so you know what the results end up to be. And of course...
but you think that with more collective work, black people could get out of...
Well, it's my theory, for whatever it might mean. It's my theory that one, for the most respect of things, has to do for themselves. And there should be no big pressure or no big burden on any one individual or any group of individual people when we all want to pull out of the same ghetto situations. And we being over 20 million strong, knowing the kind of money even we poor people blow in America, and knowing the kind of taxes we middle-class folks have to pay in America, why couldn't we find a way for everybody to donate $10 so we wouldn't have to go beg Stevie Wonder to give up $1 million,
Vision Network.